Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond Access series. It's great to have you all here again today. We haven't seen you in a couple of weeks, but we're excited to be here, and we're excited to be here with folks from our Autism Spectrum Disorder Programs team. Tonight, we have Marjorie Jordrey, who's going to be sharing with us ways to support students with the autism spectrum disorder. And in the Q&A function tonight, we have Michelle Netzler, who is the Senior Director of Specialized Programs, and Kate Cheney, who is the Director of Autism Spectrum Disorder Programs for the DOE. They'll be throughout the night answering questions around supports for students with autism spectrum disorder. As always, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function. We will be answering questions specific to the presentation tonight. You can absolutely feel free to ask any other questions, but please include an email address or a phone number so that someone can get back to you with responses. If you require captions or translations, those are available to you as well. A quick note for those who are joining us in Spanish. Buenas noches, gracias por atender esta sesión. Si ocupa usted traducción, hay subtítulos disponibles para usted. Los puede acceder a través de hacer clic en el botón que dice CC y luego en las configuraciones escoger el idioma que usted gusta. All right. We are going to go through the presentation with everyone and then have questions and answers at the end. So I want to switch it over to Marjorie and say thank you so much, Marjorie, for joining us and for presenting and being a part of the Beyond Access series.
Thank you so much, Jose. Good evening and welcome, everyone. As Jose mentioned, I'm Marjorie Jordrey. I'm the Central ASD Programs Borough Manager for Staten Island. I really appreciate being here and this opportunity to be able to share some strategies and information that we in the Central ASD Programs team have found to be successful in supporting our students with autism. So we're going to go on to the agenda and talk about how the presentation will unfold. We're going to talk about the importance of creating routines and using visuals to support those routines. Tonight, specifically, we're going to talk about four visual supports to create routines. We're going to talk about first then boards, visual activity schedules, using a personal calendar, and social narratives. One thing that I have to mention is that when I created this presentation, I didn't realize we were going live, so you will not have access to the chat box. You're going to place your questions, as Jose mentioned, in the Q&A. If I asked you to raise your hand, if you had to make a whole bunch of difficult decisions over the last 4 months, I'm absolutely positive that almost everyone here would have their hands raised high in the air. At least for the foreseeable future, this is our new normal. It's difficult enough to make decisions for ourselves and our families, but it's exponentially more difficult when information we receive changes every day. In light of this ever-changing information, families, caregivers, and students have done an absolutely outstanding job in creating and establishing new routines. But, and you knew there was going to be a but, our new normal unfortunately requires that just as we become comfortable with these routines, we will be faced with new decisions which require new transitions. Families and caregivers are worried about being safe, staying healthy. They're worried about how school will look and what to do with their family members who also need taking care of and worried about themselves. Tonight, we're going to talk about how best to prepare our children and ourselves to navigate this new normal. The Central ASD Programs team can help you to more comfortably shift into whatever form life and learning may take in the future by providing strategies and resources for you to use at home. Throughout the presentation, you're going to see slides that say Parent Corner on them. And what that is tips and resources and ideas for parents and caregivers to use based on the strategy that we're talking about. So initially, we're discussing easing into transitions, and I provided a couple of links, which you'll find on the resource document, which will help you to help your children understand what's going on with the coronavirus, and also provide you with a resource that is a checklist for parents and caregivers in order to help you support your children when they return to school. So the whole purpose of this presentation is to talk about ways to create routines. We all learn best when we practice. Many of our kids with autism thrive when using routines at home and at school and appreciate the predictability and patterns. Establishing routines can also help promote independence and foster a sense of accomplishment and pride in our kids and promote positive relationships. Routines ease the unpredictability, especially during this time for all of us. We know that routines look different for different families. Some families thrive on a lot of structure, and they find that planning works best for them. Other families, though, succeed with more flexible lifestyles. In whichever way works best for you and your family, certain routines still occur daily, like routines of meal times, bedtimes, things like that. So creating routines can still be helpful. So, how can routines help? Change can be overwhelming for all of us, but for our kids with autism, change and transitions can be additionally overwhelming for them. Routines bring a sense of calm and order and help children learn to comfort themselves and learn self-regulation, or the ability to moderate their feelings in situations that may trigger or provoke intense reactions. We can use visual supports to create these routines. And no matter what, it's going to be challenging to create routines with so many unknowns. But our team can help you to help your child using visual supports to help create a sense of routine and safety around upcoming events. For example, we talked about returning to school, and we don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet. In person, remote, blended learning, but whatever form instruction takes, it will best meet the needs of your child and family. And we think that it's helpful to include personal and school activities in the same schedule. We use visual supports every day. We create our own lists, we write notes, we follow signs when we drive. We go into stores and notice that it says the line forms here. We have our insurance cards ready when we're going to go to the doctor. We see signs for road closures and detours. And even when we go to McDonald's and look at the menu, we're using visual schedules. Visual supports are powerful tools for communication. We've discussed the forms that visual supports can take, and we've talked about how they can benefit people and children in increasing independence and communication, as well as to decrease anxiety by providing expectations about what will happen next. I want to also discuss that visual supports should look different over time to reflect your child's acquisition of whatever skill you're trying to teach them. So for example, if you are teaching a child a very simple routine, such as brushing teeth, you might include in a visual schedule specific steps as to get your toothbrush, open the medicine cabinet, get the toothpaste, take off the cap, things like that. But once your child has mastered those steps, you can then create a visual schedule which reflects his new skills, and just maybe put brush teeth or wash face or something like that. So the visual schedule should evolve over time to support your child's progress. So we talked about the 4 types of visual supports we're going to talk about. So right now we're going to go to the first then board, visual support, and we're going to talk about why we use it, how we use it, and how to implement that. So a first then board is a type of visual support. It's a very simple schedule, and it basically is a strategy that lays out 2 pictures. The first picture, which is usually entitled first, provides a visual support of an activity that sometimes might be a non-preferred activity, or just the activity that you want your child to do first. Usually the then side is something more rewarding or more motivating. So the idea is to show your child a desirable activity or item that is available after completing a less preferred task or activity. And in our lives, we often do that. I know I do. We sometimes use this strategy ourselves to motivate us to complete a job that we may not like to do, and then finally get to something that we do enjoy. So it's something that everybody uses, but this is just taking the strategy and creating a visual to help support our children. When you use a first then board, or actually any of the strategies we're going to talk about, it's best to use them proactively. And by that I mean start using and implementing a visual support before there's a problem. Don't wait until there's some kind of situation and then try to introduce it, because chances are it's not going to be as effective as it would have been if you introduced it when your child is calm and accepting of different activities and things like that. The first then board is the simplest form of a schedule, and you'll see as we go on, we start going into more complex schedules. And again, the first is where we present a task that the child will complete now, and the then is presenting the next task, which is usually the reinforcer. Now, the next couple of slides are going to provide examples of different types of first then boards. So you can see, you can get really creative in creating first then boards. You can laminate and use Velcro and make picture icons. There's an example of a first then board where a family used a binder, and they have all the picture icons that they use to actually when they're using the first then board, like all the different activities that they might put on the first side, and then the then activities, which are the reinforcers, the rewards that the child would pick themselves. So they're all contained inside this binder. But the simplest way to make it is just draw a T-chart on a piece of paper, and you can complete it just like the one in the picture. On the first side is math, and then on the then side is iPad, which is the more highly motivating activity. More examples here. You can get more complex depending on the skill of your child. Some people like to add in times or other information, other written information, or it can be as simple as just two pictures next to each other. I would always suggest adding words next to pictures just so your child learns to associate words with pictures. But you see here, first doctor visit, then playground. It can be as simple as that. So there are many different ways to create first then boards. Like we've just seen, you can get really creative, or you can keep it really simple. But you can create it using a whiteboard or different images from Google and things like that. So you can either get involved in it, or you can make it simple. I would suggest when you're first teaching it, keep it simple, and then maybe later on you can add some special interest characters or things like that. But I would keep it simple to begin with. In the resource document that you've been provided, or you will get, are 2 videos. And those videos have links to information about how to use and how to create first then boards by 2 different educators. There are many examples online. You can Google them yourself. You can look at Google Images and just scroll through and see and get many suggestions of how to create them. I, again, would suggest to keep it simple. And if you and your child are new to using visual schedules, maybe start out using the simple first then board as an introduction, and then you can kind of graduate to more complex visual schedules after that. And my Parent Corner tips are those 2 videos. There are the links to them, but the links are included in your resource document, and they are narrated and demonstrated by 2 pretty famous educators who will walk you through the creation of first then boards and explain the purposes and uses for them. So I suggest looking at those because they're really interesting, and they can be really helpful when you're creating your own.
And Marjorie, this is Jose. If we have time at the end, we'll go back and play the videos.
Okay, great. And Jose, there's one video, I think in the next, I'll tell you when it is, but there's a really great video that's 8 minutes long, and I don't know that we'll have time for it, but when we get to it, I'll explain more about it. But I think it's the most useful video in this presentation. So going back to the 4 types of visual supports that we're talking about this evening, we are going to move on to visual activity schedules. And those are also visual supports, but they're a little more complex than we've talked about with the first then boards. So we usually use the visual activity schedules to depict a series of events, as opposed to the first then boards where we just had the first activity and then the then reward activity. As you can begin to see, visual activity schedules provide a way for us to ease into transitions, and by creating a bridge between routines and activities to help children understand what has already occurred, what we're supposed to do now, and what will happen next. Using visual activity schedules proactively before introducing new changes or transitions helps give our kids the tools to more safely and calmly manage new situations with structure and predictability. It also provides our kids with a sense of control over the events and progressions of their own day. It's a good idea to involve your child when creating any type of visual schedule. This will give them a little bit of ownership and get some real buy-in to what you're doing. So I included a lot of examples in the next 2 slides, but basically what I can say is almost any activity can and should be included in a visual activity schedule. Anything that's new, even activities that your child already knows how to accomplish, should be included in the visual activity schedule, because it will help them to understand the progression of the activities during their day. And also, maybe it's easier to embed sometimes the non-preferred tasks with the preferred tasks. And it just makes it easier. I know when I go places, like if I go to a play, for instance, it might be my favorite play and I can't wait to go there. But the first thing I do when I get there is count the number of songs in the playbill, because I just want to know how long I'm staying, how long it is until intermission, and when it's going to be over. Not that I don't enjoy it, but it just gives me a sense of how much time I'm going to spend there, and when I can expect and what I can expect will happen. So there are a lot of different strategies that I think would really be helpful right now. You can include routines and information about wearing a mask in a visual activity schedule. You can include things about activities, learning activities that have to be completed for school, home activities such as bedtime, homework, wake up, brushing teeth, things that you might need to do to get ready for school. I think it's good to combine these types of activities in the schedule, because this way, when bigger changes come into play, like when school begins and things like that, you're going to have a tool to help your child transition more easily. And if you include personal activities with school related and maybe things like, doctor related and other activities like that in the same schedule, by the time you have these big transitions, it won't be anything that's scary or feels unsafe for your child to do. So I think in the way to practice and introduce it is to include all types of activities in the schedule, even in the beginning. So there's just a few more suggestions for activities that can be included in the visual schedule. Steps to proper hand washing, social distancing, things like that around health and things that we have to do right now. But even things like neighborhood walks or routines, riding in school buses, doctor appointments, social distancing, things, anything like that can just be included in the schedule, and help your child to see what's coming next, and also gauge what they've already done and the progress they've made in their day. You may wonder why we would create a routine around activities that your child currently has no difficulty transitioning between. But remember, we're creating and practicing familiar routines now in anticipation of more challenging and less appealing transitions later. We're creating familiar routines to help navigate the challenges that are to come. So that's why even putting things that are familiar and easily completed by your child at this point is really important to do, because it also makes them feel successful. And we want to build up that repertoire for the challenges that are to come, the more difficult challenges that we may face in the future. So there's basically 4 things to think about that I would suggest for visual schedules. Again, everybody uses some type of schedule. So in the beginning, it might be something created just for your child and in a way that's easy for you. But eventually, at some point, your child, especially if they're older, is going to transition to some kind of support or visual schedule that's easy for them. Like when we go to the store, I create a shopping list, so I know what I have to get when I go food shopping. I even, at this point, since I want to spend less time in the grocery store, I try to organize it by aisle. So everybody uses some type of support. And when I go to the store and I take out my list, nobody looks at me like, it's strange or my list is not stigmatizing. So we'll first create visual supports to help our students, but think toward making them more age appropriate for them as well, so they can transition to more natural supports like we use every day. Schedules must be taught. You can't obviously just give your child a schedule and let them do it. Make it fun. You model it with them, talk about it with them, engage in it with them for the first few times. You can let them struggle a little bit, that's okay, but the first few times you introduce it, make sure you go through it with them, and each time you go through it, relinquish more and more of that responsibility to your child so you can be confident that they can complete the routines independently. Again, I think I mentioned before with the first then board, don't sacrifice function to form, make it easy to use. It's tempting to make it really cute and make it involved and have all sorts of rewards and things like that. Make it simple because there's more of an opportunity for your child to be successful using it, and more of an opportunity for it to be successful. So the fourth thing to think about is put more supports into place when the environment becomes more complex. Sometimes we think about doing the opposite. Once your child is independent doing some strategies, we tend to kind of slack off and not provide the same amount of support or less support. But as the environment or situations that we find ourselves in become more complex, go back to using that schedule. Review the schedule again like you did in the beginning. Make sure your child understands it, because as he or she becomes more frustrated or has challenges with the transitions, we want to make sure those supports are in place. So these are some examples of visual activity schedules that we use. And remember, visual activity schedules increase independence, and they increase predictability of the day in the environment. They often reduce student anxiety, and they can help students and individuals organize their days, and they can be used across many settings, which is really important. You'll see the visual activity schedule on the top. Again, that's a whiteboard, and it has little icons on the bottom, presumably on a Velcro strip. There's a schedule in the corner that has time in it, so you would create this type of schedule if your child was already self-sufficient in using and reading and telling time. There's 4 little pictures at the bottom, and that's a very simple schedule, but it would help as an introduction to a visual activity schedule for a student who didn't have a lot of practice with schedules beforehand. More examples. Again, you can see different levels of complexity. The blue square looks like it may be a Post-it, as simple as that. Something you can write out and tape and stick onto a desk or someplace where your child is. Somebody created a visual activity schedule out of a file folder, and I'm sure that those little picture icons are inside the file folder. And then there's a picture of an iPad. You can go online and look for iPad visual activity schedules that you can use with an iPad. There are some free ones. There are some ones that you have to pay for, but since there are so many ways to create it, you have the option of using what's best for you. More examples again. Again, there's a really simple one, just written out. I'm not even sure if that's a whiteboard or just written out on a piece of paper, but there are other examples of visual activity schedules that are broken down into smaller steps, like the one on the bottom, and then one that just has more general steps like clean teeth, brush hair, get dressed. The one on top has time again, so that would have to reflect the skill level of your child. So there are very many ways to create visual activity schedules, and for your convenience, again, in the resource doc, we also have links to sites that can help you create simple schedules and resources to show you how to create more complex schedules. Keep in mind that when using a visual activity schedule, you also might want to use a timer for each activity. When you use a timer, you can provide your child with 2-minute, 1-minute, 30-second warnings, especially when the activity is highly preferred and doesn't include a natural ending, such as the end of a video or when finishing a snack. I've always found that a timer functions as a neutral way to signal the end of an activity without engaging in back and forth negotiation. Any negotiation of time or parts of activity can be talked about before you actually use the timer and begin the activity. Here are 2 links that also will be included in the resource document to visual activity schedule resources. The first one was created by an educator, and it just explains the purpose and uses, and it's informative. But the second one is the one I was referring to earlier, the 8-minute and 55-second one. I think it's really great because it shows you actual video of a child learning to use a visual activity schedule. And you see that he forgets to use it, and you see that they remind him to use it. And I think it's a really, really good resource because you might have questions about actually using it, implementing it, and training your child to use it. And this video really does a great job of answering those questions that you might have. Okay, Parent Corner suggestions. You need to choose the type of activity schedule that best suits your child's level of understanding. Remember, it shouldn't be frustrating. This shouldn't be something that your child doesn't like or tries to avoid. It should be something that your child loves because this is going to provide a level of independence for them. With your child, put the events in order. It's really important because this way your child can decide in some instances that they might want to do math first instead of clean their room, or they might want to pick up their toys before they, have to set the table. Something that it's something little, but it's giving some choices really empowers your child. It's also really important, I find, when you create a visual activity schedule to have some mechanism to signal when activities are completed. So crossing an activity off, removing the picture if you have picture icons on Velcro, put a check mark next to it, any method that you have to signal that the activity is done and you're moving on, and this helps your child to see his or her progress and maybe understand that they're getting closer and closer to that activity that they really, really enjoy. Create a new schedule when that one is done for new activities. Practice it, and I really think it's great to model using your own schedule with your child. So when you're first starting introducing using visual activity schedules, make sure your child sees the list that you bring to the store with you. Make sure your child, you talk out loud and you think out loud about using the list that you have about things you want to get done at home or things you're going to do in the community. But it's good to practice and model it, because then your child will understand that everybody uses a visual activity schedule in some form or another. And I think it's something that they'll really find rewarding. Praise and reward your child frequently. That's going to go a long way in getting them to use it. And then I've created a link here for free visual schedule materials, and that's in our resource document, so you'll be able to see that and you'll be able to print off resources from there. Okay, so for this, we're going back to our visual of our 4 types of visual supports, and we're going to talk about personal calendars now. This is especially helpful when there are activities coming up that may be outside of the home, and it's a really good tool for a student to have something that's personal to themselves and that they can interact with. So for transitioning between family activities, appointments, remote and in-person related services and learning, using a calendar will really be helpful. You can use the calendar in addition to your visual activity schedule. The calendar can help your child to see the big picture. You can, and you should, involve your child. Put stickers on special days that they're looking forward to. Cross off days that are already finished and in the past, so your child can also see the progress using the calendar. It'll help your child to understand the passage of time and again, be involved in the progression of their own schedule. Here are some examples of personal calendars. You can, if you have a lot of recurring activities over a week, you can create little icons that can be Velcroed onto the days of the week. You can also, if you're going to do that, you can create blank icons that you can write in with a wipe-off marker, things that don't occur all of the time but you want to add. You can just use, you can draw out a calendar or print one off of the internet, and then like you see on the upper right, you and your child can write in activities and plan for the week, the month, and help them to see the big picture of what's happening. So our parent calendar suggestions for using a personal calendar are helping your child to understand what's happening on a larger scale in the context of the week or the month. It can also help you to know, and your child to know, which days are school days and which days are home days, which can be really important. It can help your child to expect unusual events, such as doctor appointments or visits from friends or relatives. So again, things to look forward to and things that might not be so motivating, but at least you know when they're done, you can move on and go to the things that you really like. So it's helpful for a child to be able to see that and have that control. You can also offer choices when you do that, and there are certain activities that you can ask your child, would you want to do Tuesday or would you rather do it Thursday? You can also try to direct certain activities directly after maybe activities that are not as motivating or are non-preferred activities, such as maybe going to the doctor and then getting ice cream. A visual for that will be really helpful. A calendar is really good because your child can refer back to it at any time, and it's like a concrete representation of some very abstract ideas, things that go on, and it helps them because they can look back and see, oh, you know what, I did do that on this day. Or you can even refer to it with your child and say, well, can you remember the last time grandma came over? And this way it'll help your child to learn more about how to actually use the personal calendar for themselves. When changes occur, it's important that you involve your child, because if they think something's occurring on a certain day and then it changes, that can be unsettling for them. So it would be great if you can involve them and help them to reflect that change on the calendar. A personal calendar should be kept simple and contain information that's important to your child. So if at all possible, don't combine your calendar with their calendar or another child's calendar. Just have something separate for them, that so it can really reflect what their time will look like. Back to our visual supports. The last thing we're going to talk about is social narratives. So I'm just going to read this because it's from the Autism Society, and it's the definition of what a social narrative is. Social narratives are visually represented stories that describe social situations and socially appropriate responses or behaviors to help individuals with ASD acquire and use appropriate social skills. Social narratives are written descriptive accounts of appropriate social behaviors or responses to common social situations. Social narratives are really powerful tools because you can individualize them to reflect strategies and information that your child needs, and it can be done in a really positive, non-threatening way. If you, for example, if you notice that your child has trouble engaging another child, you might write a quick social story about how to do that instead of the child feeling as if either they did something that wasn't right or they have to, look to do something better next time. It's a really positive way to convey social messages to children. Again, descriptive accounts of appropriate social behaviors or responses. So why do we use a social narrative? Well, often our kids and people with autism have challenges interpreting social cues and rules, interpreting facial expressions, knowing what to do in social situations. So creating and using social narratives helps to provide them with appropriate responses to social behavior and engage in social reactions. Using social narratives is an evidence-based practice which has been shown to be effective for teaching social skills to people with autism spectrum disorders. Not only are social narratives an evidence-based practice, but they're easy to develop and implement in your home or basically anywhere that your child goes. More about why we use social narratives. So again, they're short stories, but they can be written by parents, educators, other professionals, and pretty much anybody who engages in supporting your child. They're based on your child's individual needs and your child's individual functioning levels. And that's really important because, again, we want this to be something that your child enjoys listening to, finds relevant, can understand, and actually, looks forward to reading over and over and over again, because that's part of what we suggest with the social narratives. They should be individualized according to learner needs, and they're usually short. We don't want stories that are really long in length and many pages, because the actual ideas or the reasons we're writing the story might get lost in the length of the story. We can include pictures or visual supports, and as I mentioned, they're most helpful when read immediately before the activity and consistently and over again. So if you know your child is going to see friends or see relatives, and your child's social story is about engaging in a conversation, before you leave the house, read the story with your child. If your child can read, have your child read the story to you. Read it, talk about it, and then when you go out, if you see your child, using any of those skills that they read in their social narrative, praise them or reward them, just to kind of reinforce what they're learning. Social narratives should be written in positive language, and they should teach children what to do, and try to avoid repeating what they should not do. Although in some social narratives, we just briefly touch on that, but most of the social narratives should be phrased in a positive fashion. Here's just a quick example. just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So when I get frustrated, sometimes when I go out with my family, I get frustrated when I cannot have what I want or do not get to have a choice. Sometimes what I want is not available when I want it, and I may have to wait. This may make me frustrated. It's okay to get frustrated, but it's not okay to hit. The next time I get frustrated, I will try to, and then it provides 4 choices. Now, notice what I said. This is phrased in a positive way. It does mention hitting because that's one of the behaviors that we wanted to talk about, but it doesn't say anything negative about it, or it doesn't go on and on about it. It just mentions it once, and then it provides 4 strategies that the child can do instead of the go-to, which may be hitting. I can say, I'm frustrated. I can clap my hands or stomp my foot. I can take 10 deep breaths, and I can pick another offer choice. I love the fact that number 2 is in there because it kind of acknowledges that when you get frustrated, you have to do something, and clapping hands or stomping feet, although, it signals frustration, it doesn't hurt anybody and it's nothing bad. And sometimes when we're frustrated, we do similar things. And then it goes on to say, making an appropriate choice will keep me calm and make my family happy. It also gives a link there, which is provided in the resource document, so that you can see this type of social narrative and create your own. So, samples of social narratives. This is several different resources, and they're all contained in that document, around different kind of activities. You can create social narratives around a bathroom routine. You can create visuals to support those social narratives around doing homework online, at home for e-learning, which can be frustrating or challenging for your child, staying healthy. This link also gives suggestions about social narratives for stories such as I miss my friends at school. It also provides these social narratives in Spanish and in English at the same link. There's social narratives around things like my schedule, which will change, which really helps us with the transitions and things like that. Having problems with internet at home for e-learning days, and doing my schoolwork online at home for e-learning days. Those are 2 similar social narratives, but they're presented in different ways, and they're just examples that you can use and you can edit and change and make it to something that is individualized for your child. The parent corner suggestions for social narratives are, in the beginning, identify one skill to practice with your child. Write the social narrative around that one skill. You might even write a beginning social narrative around one skill that your child already knows, to just set them up for success. Praise them when you see it, and this way social narratives will become something positive for them in the future. With your child, write a social narrative using pictures, and you can take your own pictures. It's great. Kids love when you put pictures of them in social narratives. I do that a lot in schools because kids love seeing themselves. And if I want to write a social narrative around a certain specific strategy, let's say, I don't know, sitting in the meeting area with a group, I might take a picture of them sitting in the meeting area. And as soon as they see the picture, they realize, because we've already practiced it for the picture, they've already been rewarded, and they love to see their own picture in the social narrative. So that's a really motivating thing to do as well. Read the social narrative with your child before engaging and practicing the skill, like we talked about before. It's really important to reread it often, and then create opportunities directly thereafter for your child to practice the skill, and reward them as you see the skill being used and practiced. And I have 2 little asterisks there because I think it's important to mention, if you don't see the skill practiced perfectly at first, it's okay. Reward all approximations of that skill. So when you see your child trying to approach another child, but maybe the first couple of times they're not so good at it, or they kind of don't get it right, just still reward them, and every time they get closer and closer to the right way to demonstrate the skill, then you'll keep rewarding them as it goes. So always reward your child for any approximation that you see them using for the skill in your social narrative. Here's more suggestions in the parent corner. More resources for parents. Here's other links to social narratives on why I use a schedule. So that's an excellent way to begin to introduce using schedules. It's a free resource. And then there's another resource for parents about using a social script to explain a new situation that can be downloaded. So that might be informative as well, to learn how and when you would use a social script to help you introduce something. Okay, again, I wrote chat box, but what I mean is Q&A. So any questions that you have throughout this presentation, please put them in the Q&A, and then we will try to respond to them for you.
Thank you so much, Marjorie and team for coming and joining and sharing information with families. We're getting close to time, but I do want to go to Michelle quickly to see if there's anything that's been going on in the Q&A that she'd like to share. And Michelle, you might be muted.
Hi, thank you. So we have had some suggestions that might be helpful to share. Some parents have talked about how they created schedules and using a Google device or Amazon Alexa to create a schedule and reminders. And the rest of the questions have been specific, but it would be great if we could. Do we have a few minutes to go back to some of those videos?
We absolutely do. So I just wanted to make sure. I honestly just wanted you to mention the suggestion of the Alexa, because I thought that was genius.
It's great. It's a terrific suggestion. Yes.
All right, so I'm gonna switch up the video for a second. I'll hop on camera.
Maybe you want to go back to first the videos in the first then board and just play maybe the first one there, because that's Paula Kluth, and she's a pretty well respected person.
Are those videos in the resource document?
Yes, they're in the resource document, and they're also in this presentation. I don't know, I think you might be able to click on them from there because the links are embedded, but you can go to the resource document as well. Okay, I'm in the resource doc. Okay, so we're doing this together, folks. Where it says Paula Kluth first then board. Yep. That's a 3-minute video that's nice, talking about. All right. Let's watch this video together.
Hi, my name is Paula Kluth. Hi, I'm Sheila Danaher, and we are authors of a new book called From Tutor Scripts to Talking Sticks, and the subtitle is 100 Ways to Differentiate Instruction in K-12 Inclusive Classrooms. We have created a set of miniature videos to look at some of our favorite sports from the book. And in this video, we are going to be looking at idea number 50, which is about visual support that's used for students with autism and other disabilities. It's called first then boards. So first then boards are really first introduced. They can be introduced either as a transition tool or a mini portable schedule. So it can really be a student's first schedule in as early as preschool, and it can also be used for symbols with students that are non-readers in high school. And really the idea is that first is usually a work activity. Sometimes it's something that students aren't really motivated to do. So that might be how you start, and then they get to choose from a choice board. And the really important part of this is that it is a student choice, and so you can control what choices the student has, but the student actually makes the choice. And so first they will work, and then they will be rewarded with a choice of their own. As the student is able to master this, so you're just doing one activity and then right away they get their break or their choice, you can quickly transition into, first you will do 3 tasks, and again they can be symbolic icons, or as the student starts, they can write it in themselves or you can write it in, and there then is again a student choice of what they would like to do afterwards. So as their day progresses, you can put these together, and as you move along, it actually becomes a mini schedule for the day. So you can see it's first, then, so you can actually have all 7 activities that the child's going to do. You could also put in their breaks here so that they're already predetermined breaks, and they get to see the end. And we know that especially students with difficulty transition, they really want to see the end result. How long do I have to do this? When will it be over?
All right, I'm gonna pause it there. But you all have access to all of the links in the resource guide and the resource document, which has all of the videos as well on there. So we have had a couple of questions come in since we started the video, and so I want to just really quickly, I saw one that I wanted to address, and so how can parents create or access some of these the examples demonstrated if they don't have a printer at home? And I think that's a great question, because not all of us have the same resources, like having a printer or having something like an Alexa device to help us around. So there's a guide that I'd like to share with you all that goes a little more depth into this. Schools.nyc.gov. So if we go to learning and learn at home, activities and supports, and then one more time, special education supports. Here we have the promoting positive behavior guidance, which is translated into the 9 languages. And so if we click, I'll click on English. But if you go through, it has a lot of the same information that we went through over today, talking about first then boards. So you can see here that the family didn't have a printer, but they had some Post-its and some crayons, and so they wrote out their first then board. Also, when it comes to visual schedules, sometimes you can draw your own pictograms to use. You can use objects that are related with the task. So if it's mealtime, using a fork, cleaning up a washcloth, brushing teeth, your toothbrush, or you can actually just write out a checklist and have check them off every time. The key, and you'll notice to all of this, is that you need something to show that the task has been completed. So if it's pulling the picture down from the schedule or the item, or checking off the list, it communicates that the task has been completed. So there are definitely helpful ways that you can do this. It doesn't have to be high tech at all. Michelle, Marjorie, did I get that right? And then anything you want to add to that?
Absolutely. In each one of the strategies, when you have access to this presentation, you can go back, because for all 4 of the strategies, I showed high-tech ways to kind of do it, and I also showed really simple ways with just objects at home that don't require a printer at all, like using Post-its, using a piece of paper and creating a T-chart, things like that. So I tried to provide both kind of ends of the spectrum there to show you, if you do have things and you want to go crazy and make, like, laminated things with Velcro and things, you're free to do that. But it's going to serve the same purpose as if you take a piece of blank computer paper and you draw a T-chart and write first then, or you make a schedule for your child. So it's just what works for you and what resources you have, but it will, whatever way you create it will have no impact on how you use it and the success that it can have.
Thanks once again. And so we're a little over time now, everyone. So I want to thank everyone who stuck around. And I wanted to let you know that, again, in the document, in the chat, there's a resource document that has all of the links that were shared today throughout the presentation. I also included the link to the YouTube page. So if you haven't done so already, click on that, subscribe to the Beyond Access series YouTube channel, which is where we've been uploading all of the presentations. All of the previous presentations are up there. They have captions and they have translations in many different languages. This presentation will also be there by the end of tomorrow. So if you are subscribed, you will get a notification that tells you that it's available, and then the link to the resource document will be in the description of the YouTube video, so you'll be able to access that afterwards as well. Once again, I just want to say thank you for our ASD programs team for joining. Thank you, Michelle and Kate, for monitoring the Q&A. And thank you all for joining and coming to another session of the Beyond Access series. We look forward to seeing you all in future presentations. And until next time, stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.